Mom was finally pregnant with her second child, but the prenatal checkup revealed severe congenital limb deformities. I convinced my parents to follow the doctor's advice and terminate the pregnancy. And they did. But when my dad saw the aborted fetus, a perfectly formed baby boy, he completely broke down. He started beating my mom and me every day, blaming me for meddling and my mom for being useless and leaving him without an heir. My mom hated me for years because of it, and she teamed up with my dad to push me down the stairs to my death. Now, reborn, my parents had a different plan. This time, no one's going to stop my son from being born, my father declared. I smiled. Since you want a son so badly, I'll respect your wishes. Welcome to Panda Storyboard. Put on your headphones, get cozy, and settle in. Let's enjoy this story together. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. Now, let's begin. The pungent smell of disinfectant and the blinding pale lights overhead. Sarah struggled to open her heavy eyelids. After a moment of disorientation, her heart suddenly constricted. This wasn't a hospital morgue. It was an obstetrics clinic. Then a familiar sharp voice rang in my ears, filled with a hysterical joy completely different from my previous life. Quack. I think you're nothing but a quack. What nonsense are you spouting? Gideon's face was flushed, spit almost hitting the doctor opposite him. How could there be anything wrong with my son? No one is going to stop my son from being born. Lunaire shrieked as well, snatching the prenatal report that read, high probability of limb malformation, abortion recommended, and tore it to shreds, paper flying everywhere. Did you hear that? My son is perfectly fine. You heartless people just want to swindle us out of our money. Sarah's blood ran cold, inch by agonizing inch. The scene, these words, she had been reborn. She was back on the very day her mother Lumiere received the prenatal report that had sealed her tragic fate in her previous life. What chilled her to the bone even more was the sight of her beastly parents, Gideon and Lumiere, looking so certain and excited. Before Sarah could even process this shocking revelation, Gideon roughly yanked her from her chair and pushed her in front of the doctor. He patted her shoulder as if showing off a prized possession. Doctor, take a look at my eldest daughter. So healthy, so smart. How could a child of Gideon ever be anything but perfect? Lumiere, on the other hand, glared at Sarah like she was a thief, her eyes filled with venom. As if Sarah was the demon who would harm her precious son, she wished she could banish her from her sight immediately. Sarah lowered her head, hiding the tumultuous waves and bone-chilling coldness in her eyes. Yet, on her face, she forced out a timid, submissive expression. In her previous life, it was also here that she had pleaded desperately, analyzed the pros and cons, and finally managed to persuade her parents to give up the child. But what was the result? Her father, Gideon, had completely collapsed after the deformed fetus was aborted, simply because it was a boy. He unleashed all his resentment on her and her mother, beating them mercilessly. And her mother, Lunaire, that weak and foolish woman, eventually sided completely with her husband, believing Sarah had dashed her hopes. Together with Gideon, she personally pushed Sarah off the balcony from a 20-story building. In the instant of her fall, the wind roared in her ears, yet she remembered with chilling clarity how she had desperately clutched at the clothes of that despicable couple, dragging them down with her, in a desperate act of mutual destruction, into the boundless darkness. She never thought fate would actually grant her a second chance. Dad! Mom! The air in the taxi on the way home was so thick it was almost suffocating. Sarah watched the streetlights flash by outside, her voice deliberately hoarse as she tentatively began. What the doctor said isn't entirely unreasonable. Shut up. Before she could finish, Lumiere shrieked, like a cat with its tail stepped on. She grabbed Sarah's arm, her nails digging almost into the flesh. What are you plotting, you jinx? You're just jealous that I'm having a son. I'm telling you, Sarah, everything in this house will belong to your brother from now on. Every penny you earn will be saved for him, to pay for his education, to get him a wife and a house. Gideon, sitting in the passenger seat, whipped his head around at her words, his eyes fierce. He kicked Sarah hard on the shin bone, making her gasp in pain. But she bit her lip and didn't utter a sound. Did you hear what your mother said? You good-for-nothing waste of space? If you dare utter another word of nonsense, I'll rip your mouth apart. Get to work and serve your mother, or I'll break your legs, Gideon threatened viciously, as if Sarah were his mortal enemy. The driver glanced uneasily in the rearview mirror, but didn't dare say a word. Sarah slowly lowered her head, her scattered bangs obscuring all expression. She gently rubbed her throbbing calf, and when she looked up again, the cold glint in her eyes had vanished. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I understand, Dad, Mom. I'll take good care of Mom. And I'll take good care of my future brother, too." Yet, a voice in her heart sneered. "Fine. Since you're so determined to have this precious little one, then may you get what you wish for. What did all my earnest pleas get me in my last life? This time I'll open my eyes wide and watch how you cling to this hope as you descend step by step into hell, how you bring about your own demise." A few days later, Sarah's grandmother Agatha was brought from the countryside by Gideon, ostensibly to care for the pregnant woman. The moment the old lady stepped through the door, the house was filled with a strong smell of incense and candles. Every day she would mutter incantations, holding a talisman she'd found in some obscure corner, burning it to ash, stirring it into water, and forcing Lumiere to drink it. In her previous life, Lumiere had detested such things to the extreme, constantly bickering with the old lady. This time, however, she seemed like a different person. Not only did she not resist, but she even proactively asked Agatha daily, "Mom, where's today's talisman water? Please don't forget the time." Seeing her daughter-in-law so cooperative, Agatha grew even more smug, patting her chest as she guaranteed, "Don't worry, with me here, I promise this baby will be a golden grandson, plump and healthy, and no one will be able to snatch him away." Sarah watched Lumiere gulp down the murky talisman water without even a flicker of a frown, a faint smile of satisfaction even playing on her lips. Sarah sneered inwardly. Just then, she walked over with a glass of warm water, her voice tinged with concern. "Mom, Grandma, this talisman water, does it really work? I heard doctors say that during pregnancy, it's important to get scientific nutrition. These things have unknown ingredients." "You ignorant little brat, what do you know?" Agatha's triangular eyes glared, and she slammed her cane on the ground. "This is a divine birth, a treasure bestowed upon our Gideon's family by the heavens. Stop your alarmist talk. I think you're just jealous your mom is having a son." Gideon waved his hand impatiently. "Get back to your room. Don't be a nuisance here. Your mother and grandmother's business is none of your concern." Sarah lowered her head, a flicker of sarcasm in her eyes. Fine, she thought. Let them continue their superstitious nonsense. The more they indulged, the more spectacular their downfall would be. Months passed. Sarah worked multiple jobs, keeping her head down and saving every penny she could. On the surface, she was the obedient daughter, dutifully handing over her earnings to her parents for the baby's future. But secretly, she was building her own safety net, squirreling away money in hidden accounts they knew nothing about. She also started documenting everything: the abuse, the favoritism, the insane preparations for a baby who might not even survive birth. She recorded conversations, took photos of her bruises, saved text messages, evidence for the day when she'd meet it. When Lumiere's water finally broke, the entire household erupted into chaos. Agatha was burning incense and chanting prayers. Gideon was pacing frantically, and Sarah calmly called the ambulance and packed her mother's hospital bag. At the hospital, the delivery was difficult and dangerous. The baby, a boy, as they'd so desperately wanted, was born alive but severely deformed, just as the initial prenatal report had predicted. His limbs were twisted and underdeveloped, his tiny body racked with pain from the moment he entered the world. The doctor's expression was grave. "The child has multiple congenital abnormalities. He'll require constant medical care, multiple surgeries, and even then, his quality of life will be severely compromised. I'm so sorry." Gideon's face went white, then red, then purple with rage. "You're lying. My son is perfect. This is a conspiracy." But the evidence was right there in the incubator, a tiny, suffering infant who would never have a normal life. Lumiere broke down completely, wailing and screaming. Agatha started accusing the hospital of switching babies, her shrill voice echoing through the corridors. And Sarah? Sarah stood quietly in the corner, watching it all unfold exactly as she'd known it would. Over the following months, the family's descent was swift and brutal. The medical bills piled up faster than they could pay them. Gideon had to take out loans, mortgage the house, sell everything of value. The baby, whom they'd named Theodore, required round-the-clock care, specialized equipment, constant doctor visits. Lunire became a shell of herself, consumed by guilt and exhaustion. Agatha's superstitious remedies did nothing but drain more money and time. And through it all, they blamed Sarah for everything. "If you had just kept your mouth shut in my first life, none of this would have happened," Lunire screamed at her one night. "This is your curse upon us." Sarah just smiled coldly. "I didn't curse anyone, Mom. You made your choice. You wanted this son so badly, now you have him." The breaking point came when Theodore was 6 months old. Gideon, drowning in debt and desperation, had taken out a massive life insurance policy on the baby. Sarah discovered this by accident when she found the paperwork hidden in his desk. Her blood ran cold as she realized what he was planning. He was going to kill Theodore for the insurance money, murder his own son to escape the financial hell he'd created. She had a choice to make. In her previous life, she'd tried to save them from themselves, and they'd killed her for it. Now she could walk away, let Gideon commit his crime, and be free of them all. But, looking at little Theodore, suffering and innocent, she couldn't do it. He hadn't asked to be born into this nightmare. He was a victim, just like she was. Sarah went to the police with the insurance documents and recordings of her father's drunken rants about solving the problem. She handed over everything: years of documented abuse, evidence of her parents' mental instability, proof of her grandmother's dangerous treatments. The authorities moved quickly. Theodore was placed in protective custody, a ward of the state who would receive proper medical care in a facility equipped to handle his needs. Gideon was arrested for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and attempted murder. Lunire, faced with losing both her husband and son, had a complete psychotic break. She tried to kidnap Theodore from the hospital, resulting in a chaotic confrontation on the hospital's rooftop. In the struggle, she fell, sustaining severe brain injuries that left her in a vegetative state. Agatha, upon hearing the news, had a massive stroke and was left paralyzed. With no one to care for her, she slowly withered away in her rural shack, clinging to her delusions about her divine golden grandson until the bitter end. Sarah stood in the courtroom as Gideon was sentenced. He screamed at her, his face contorted with rage. "You've been reborn too. You must have been reborn too. I'll haunt you even as a ghost." She watched silently as he was dragged away, his roars fading down the corridor. She felt nothing, no satisfaction, no remorse, nothing but a profound emptiness. Later, at the suburban cemetery, Sarah placed a bouquet of daisies before Theodore's small tombstone. The baby hadn't survived long after being placed in state care. His body had been too damaged, too broken from the start. She knelt down and whispered softly, "Little brother, I'm so sorry for the way you came into this world and the way you left it. If there's a next life, I hope you find a warm home, free from illness and hardship, filled with peace and joy, and truly loved by someone." Through legal channels, Sarah recovered the portion of her mother's premarital assets that she was entitled to inherit, as well as the proceeds from Gideon's seized assets. She sold Agatha's dilapidated ancestral home in the countryside. All the proceeds, along with a portion of her own savings, she anonymously donated to several local charities dedicated to combating domestic violence and assisting underprivileged children. When the donation receipts arrived, she glanced at them before putting them away, a profound sense of peace settling over her. Sarah successfully completed her medical studies, joining the neonatal department at the city hospital with outstanding academic results. Thanks to her solid theoretical foundation and calm, meticulous approach, she quickly grew into a capable young doctor, able to handle responsibilities independently. Under the glare of the surgical lights, she was completely absorbed in performing a complex, life-saving procedure on a critically ill premature newborn. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead, yet her hands remained as steady as a rock. When the readings on the monitoring equipment finally stabilized and the baby let out its first cry, faint but strong, everyone in the operating room breathed a sigh of relief. Sarah took off her mask, revealing a tired but relieved smile. She walked over to the incubator, gazing at the tiny life within, her eyes gentle yet resolute. "Doctor, thank you so much. You saved my son's life again." A young father, overwhelmed with emotion, stammered his gratitude outside the ward, bowing repeatedly to Sarah, who had just emerged from the operating room. Sarah waved her hand, her voice gentle. "It's what I'm here for. The baby's condition is stable for now, but we'll need to keep a close eye on him. You two should also get some rest." The sunlight streamed through the hospital corridor's glass windows, illuminating her white scrubs and reflecting in her clear, bright eyes. The darkness and bloodshed of her past had long been buried by her own hands. Now she was meticulously painting the canvas of her future, stroke by stroke, with boundless light and hope. She knew the road ahead was long, but she would walk it with unwavering determination. Every life she saved was a redemption, not for her parents, who had made their choices, but for herself, for the girl who had tried so hard to do the right thing and been punished for it. In this life, she learned a hard truth. Sometimes the greatest kindness is letting people face the consequences of their own decisions. You can't save those who don't want to be saved. You can only save yourself. And that's exactly what Sarah had done. She'd saved herself, built a new life from the ashes of the old, and found purpose in protecting the innocent. Those who, unlike her parents, deserved a second chance. As she walked down the hospital corridor toward her next patient, Sarah felt lighter than she had in 2 lifetimes. The weight of her parents' expectations, their abuse, their selfishness, all of it had finally lifted. She was free. And this time, she was going to make it count.